Okay, guys, I'm just going to trip right into this presentation. Thank you for coming. We're glad to see a full room. So before we get started and introduce ourselves and our session, we actually want to get an idea of who's in the room. And so by a raise of hands, if you're in IT, could you raise your hands? Okay, how about BI or analytics? Sales operations.
Perfect.
Okay, how about like sales leadership? A few of you. Are there any sales people in the room?
Two guys.
Sweet. Okay, so welcome to our session. This is the Tableau on Tableau track, specific to how we use sales dashboards and Tableau within our sales organization. So what we hope is that you're here because you have some access to sales data and that you want to use that to help drive revenue with your salespeople. We are giving this presentation differently than maybe other presentations you've seen because we are salespeople. And we're hoping that this presentation is a little unique because we want to give you insight into kind of the twisted mind of a salesperson. And I know you all think that. And it's sort of true. We are excited to be here. We appreciate you being here. And let's just jump into who we are. So my name is Stacy. Hold on.
The clicker.
Yeah, that has to be. Perfect. Okay. So I spent 2 years in the commercial sales space working in the Los Angeles market at Tableau and moved recently onto our sales readiness and enablement team, so I get to coach and train reps on how to sell Tableau. So in my role, I use Tableau all the time, but back up to why I'm here and why I chose to come to Tableau. I was in pharmaceutical sales, so any pharma folks out there? Okay, just a couple of you. So when I was in pharmaceutical sales, I did that for 7 years, and we had access to a ton of data, but it was delivered to us in an Excel file as a huge data dump from an SAP system. And I got asked to take on the role of making that data more user-friendly for the reps. So I went onto YouTube and I learned how to write macros, and I had this big old Excel file. I put a worksheet at the beginning and made a space where you could write in your doctor's names. And then you click this button and it shows you, voila, what they've written in the past and what insurance plans they usually write for. And I was a huge hero for my teammates, and that only took me 3 months. So no big deal. Fast forward a few months later, a friend of mine tells me about Tableau, tells me I should interview there. Whether you know it or not, we all have to demo during our interviews, and so I'm prepping for my demo. I pull open Getting Started with Tableau, just the video, and I'm flooded with emotions. One is just awe and excitement at the possibility, and the other is sort of pain and anger at watching this program do something that would have taken about 3 minutes. That took me 3 months. So fast forward to my career at Tableau, I've been able to use dashboards that the company provided to me to be very successful in the role and help people like yourselves figure out if it's the right fit and how to best use the product. So my section of this talk will focus on the company-approved dashboards that we've made and how we use those to help reps self-manage their time, target the right people, and when they do talk to those people, have educated conversations.
Perfect. Everyone. So my name is Peter Schmitz. I've been with Tableau a little bit over 4 years, and I kind of had a different journey than a lot of people at Tableau. So I actually started up in Seattle at our headquarters. I was there about 6 months, and then they asked me to move down to here in Austin to help start our central office, because at the time we only had Seattle and San Francisco. So then I was here 2 years working as an acquisition rep for net new accounts. So anyone who hadn't bought Tableau before, that was in my geo. I moved on from that. After 2 years, they asked me to rinse and repeat to Washington, D.C. to open our last domestic expansion. And so I was there a year and a half working as an existing business rep, handling any accounts that had purchased at least one license of Tableau before, and obviously met the geo and hierarchy criteria internally. Then about 4 months ago, I had the opportunity to apply on our enterprise team, and so I've moved a third time with Tableau to Chicago, and so now I cover enterprise accounts out of the Chicago area. And coming from my background, I actually was managing a store, Target store in Seattle at the time. So I had about 350 employees underneath me, and in that store, I had to plan my mornings I knew if I got there an hour early, I knew which reports I could bring up on the computer that would take long enough to load that I could go back and check inventory and then come back to the computer, print it out. So now Target's more advanced, they have tablets, things like that. But back in the day, if you remember in Target, the managers were always the ones with like books wrapped up in their back pocket, walking around, because at any time we could get a jet visit from some of our SVPs, and we had to just pop off numbers and know that from these reports. And so I actually left Target about a month before they went enterprise-wide with Tableau, so it's kind of interesting that I came to Tableau right at that time. And so, working remote in all those places, starting new offices, I didn't have a lot of resources. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how I kind of had to become independent and kind of vertically integrate all the teams that I relied on into my own position. Because a lot of times, since they were remote, I couldn't just walk down the hall and say, hey, can you jump on this call in an hour? Or, hey, can you come over and help me work on this? So I really had to get very intense with the product. And that actually led me to get, internally we call it gold certification for our pre-sales team, and only that team is required to get it. So I'm the only one, I think, out of 900 or so global reps that have gold certification. So what you'll see today is a little bit more of some advanced things that I've done. We'll go through the basics and we'll kind of walk through there. But that's what I'm going to be showing today is kind of what a sales rep can do if they have access to self-service, either in Tableau Server online or in Tableau Desktop. So we wanted to kind of talk to you guys really quick about what you'll get today from both of us. But so quick raise of hands, it seems like most people, sales ops, IT. So who in here wants their sales reps to sell more, right? Perfect, pays the bills, right? Keeps the lights on. And who in here wants their sales reps to be more effective on the phones, right? Add value to that customer. Perfect, great. And then raise of hands, and I'm hoping this is a good one. Who in here has gotten a voicemail from someone asking for 15 minutes of time and you don't know who they are, what they do, or what their company is about? Perfect, yeah. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today is how to get your sales reps to be adding value on that call, knowing the story of the customer before they dial in, not just to say, hey, it's Peter with Tableau, how's those licenses going? What are you working on right now? What are your projects doing? Today is going to be about how you guys can collaborate with your sales team. So again, as Stacy said, we're very slow moving. We don't like change, but we love to bug you guys all day long for all the answers. And so we want to teach you guys how to just what we think and what motivates us, and then some ideas for collaboration and iteration to make effective dashboards. How you guys can build the back ends or build these dashboards to better help your sales reps.
We also are going to talk about what happens when you give salespeople data freedom. So at Tableau, I see a lot of shaking heads. We believe in liberty and governance for all. So we all have a desktop license and a server license. We understand that that's a rare and unique licensing structure, okay? We're going to ask you today to just let go of some of that fear and just imagine and just listen to what we're saying, and then you can leave and compartmentalize it into what works for your organization, okay? So maybe some of the things that Peter's going to show he's doing in desktop, you might have somebody do in online with web editing functioning. Maybe you just have someone come and tell you what they want you to do, right? But we just want to give you a glimpse of what happens when you offer that data freedom.
And then today, the session is marked as a beginner session, so we are going to go over the basic concepts, foundations that we did to build the dashboards. We've also mixed in a little bit of some advanced things throughout it, so that way you guys can not only see kind of where to start, but then where that journey can lead you and what's possible when you give a little bit more data freedom. So we want you guys to come out of here today excited, learning a couple of new things. And for anyone with kind of closed data systems or not a lot of data access for people internally, We understand those, and we are going to talk a little bit about today of how you can still keep those checks and balances around your data, but use Tableau so that we're not lining outside your door and knocking on it all day long and bugging you guys for those reports. So at the very least, our ask for you guys today is just to go back and schedule a 15-minute conversation with someone in your organization, just to start that conversation. Even if it doesn't go anywhere, just see if people have that hunger to get a little bit more data, and see if people are open after we show you today of kind of what's possible.
Cool. So, in the beginning of preparing this session, we thought about what our current company-approved dashboards are, and we actually went to the source of the folks who made it. So, was anybody in Martha's session yesterday about sales data, how she made the commercial scorecard? All right, good. All new stuff. So Martha talked about how she and Daisy DePaulis, our VP of commercial sales at the time, met together and talked about there's so many dashboards at Tableau, you can imagine we all have desktop licenses, right? So it's a little messy. And they were talking about how to make the right dashboards, because a lot of times the ops team thought that salespeople would want to see something that the salespeople had no interest in seeing. I don't know if you've ever run into that. So what they found and what they discovered was to make a really effective sales dashboard, you have to think how salespeople think. And we are here to let you see a little bit about that, help you understand what's important to us and also what's motivating. So we're going to go through a couple of those characteristics of what makes a good salesperson. If you happen to be someone who interviews salespeople, you kind of want to look for these characteristics. So the first one is they are competitive. So, I mean, if you're in an interview with somebody, and many of you know this, and you're talking to them about their sales role, and they're not very interested in winning or being the best or being at the top or beating the competition, you are talking to the wrong person. We are freakishly competitive. It bothers people, but it works really well for us and for you and for your organization to sell more. So we like to use that competitive nature, and we have dashboards that help channel that competition. The next characteristic is salespeople are numbers driven. So we want to know what our goal is, where we stand in relation to our goal, the number of activities it would take in a day for us to reach our goal. You can ask Peter or myself. We always will be able to tell you like what our percentage to quota was for the last few quarters, or what the size, the exact dollar amount of the largest deal we sold most recently, right? We're numbers driven and we really care about that, and we use dashboards for that as well. We'll go through that. The final piece, salespeople are curious. So Peter talked about that 15 minutes of your time phone call. When you are on the phone with a salesperson, maybe even a Tableau salesperson, when is the last time that somebody asked you one too many questions, right? It happens a lot. It's okay, we're curious because we know that the information we get at face value is not often the full story. And you want to find somebody to hire who really cares about digging deeper to understand what that deeper problem is, in order to really see if your product, your solution is the right solution for them. And the same thing goes for data. If you give us reports that are face value, we are going to ask more questions, right? If you tell us we need to call a certain list of people, we're going to ask who should we call first and why? And what can we say on those calls, right? So we have dashboards for that. So the final piece to keep in mind, and I feel like you've probably heard it here at the conference a number of times, is that a really good dashboard, if you understand what's happening in that dashboard, is something maybe you look at often. A good dashboard can tell you what you need to know within 10 seconds. So we're going to show you how on some of these dashboards, we are able to ask a question, open up the dashboard, and know the answer to that. Where do I stand? What am I missing out on? Who should I be talking to, right? So I'm going to jump into the demo portion, and I'm going to talk through our specific Tableau Bless sales dashboards. Today I'm using Tableau Online. I think I need to stand here because I might get squeaky with that guy. I'm using Tableau Online. So these are dashboards that have been anonymized. So this isn't our data. But this is similar to the dashboards that we use. It's a little more simplified. We obviously have a lot more data points, but it's the same structure, okay? So let's jump into the start of my day. So I'm a salesperson, I'm pretty competitive, I come in the morning, and I wanna ask a couple questions. Where do I stand compared to my number? And where do I stand compared to my colleagues, right? So the quota dashboard is something we use to help people answer that question. So as you can see here, let's say that my name is Betty Clark, which I'd be kind of bummed in this situation, but let's just say, for example, I'm Betty Clark right here. I can look and I can see that a couple of things are happening. One, based on space, I can see this is my quota and this is my attainment. So I haven't reached quota yet. I can also see that my bar is gray and not green. So we use space and color as visual cues to help people get things right off the bat, right? Am I at quota, and how far am I from quota? The beneficial thing here, there's obviously different filters. I could change it to percentage quota or dollars. But I'm thinking, well, there's certain people here that are doing really well, and I want to self-manage and I want to emulate those people. So I might filter here. There it is. I'm in the West. So I'm going to filter to the West, and maybe I'll sort. And I can see that I'm really kind of at the bottom. But really quickly, in a matter of seconds, can you tell me who I should be looking at and emulating within my West office? Ruth. And just in case Ruth got really lucky with a big deal and someone called in that day, who else? Maybe Margaret, maybe Dorothy, right? So this is the first step of my day. This is a great dashboard for us to be able to kind of channel that competitive energy of reps. And I'm the type of person who pulls up this dashboard every time I get a sale. So I just want to see my bar move just a tiny bit, right? Or a lot, depending on how much you bought. So next, if we think I do want to emulate someone like Ruth, what is Ruth doing? What are her activities? What's her day-to-day like, right? Because you can't just say I want to reach quota and go and reach it. There's behaviors, right? And so what we do, we gather all of our information through Salesforce. Just so you know, on the back end, our data comes from Salesforce and Eloqua. And so I'll jump into our commercial scorecard. So this scorecard specifically shows me a lot of information. And this was made because we had a dashboard for everything. We had a dashboard about what leads you needed to call, a dashboard about how you were doing with quota, how your activities were, your territory management, right? And they decided to pull it all together in this really simple format. But I can jump on here, and I'm curious if you guys could tell me, if this was my scorecard, what areas I need to work on. What is it? I've got gaps because I didn't make enough opportunities last week. I have 44 past due leads. Yikes. I don't know whose this is, but that would not happen to me. And I haven't engaged very many accounts. That says 0. That's not possible. So visually what you're seeing here is bars that go green when they're at the goals. So what they did when they set out to make this dashboard is they decided what number of calls, what number of demos, how many opportunities should be built in a given week to create the right sales results, right? And it's kind of like, who are the best athletes and what are they doing? Who are the elite people? And then I'm gonna try to emulate that person and take as many shots or laps or whatever, right? So this is that concept. So maybe I'm making enough calls, but I haven't been doing enough demos. Or maybe I'm making a lot of calls, but I'm not calling the prime leads who are raising their hands saying, we're interested in talking about Tableau, right? So this dashboard here just really helps me to self-manage. So I might look at this and I might say, all right, here's my information. Well, let's switch. I'm going to drill down and look at Ruth's. And perhaps she has 0 primed leads because she called them all. She's making a lot more calls than me. Or maybe she has engaged with all of her accounts this quarter, and I haven't. So that gives me a good opportunity to understand what I should be doing next. This dashboard is interactive, so I can jump in if I have a question and I'm like, okay, who are these primed leads? I can go ahead and click that, and a list will show up of those leads. Then I can hover over this circle saying that I haven't called them, and I can click the Salesforce.com link. That'll take me directly into Salesforce, so I have their phone number, their email, historic activities, anything like that, right? So the value here is that we're showing the metric, we're showing where reps land, and then we're giving them a way to act based on that right away. We love this as reps. You can tell me what I'm doing wrong, but I want to know more what I can do to make it right. So let's say that if we go back to just the regular scorecard, I decide that my goal and what my gap is that I haven't talked to or engaged enough of my accounts. So I might jump in here and see who those accounts are, and it'll list the accounts at the top and then the actual contacts at the bottom. And I could just start on the phones, right? I could just say, okay, account ABC marketing. Hi, this is Stacy. I am your Tableau sales representative. I haven't talked to you this quarter. I just want to call and check in. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? Have you gotten that call ever? Right. But I don't want to do that. I want to have better educated and more targeted conversations. So let's say I'm all out of primed leads, which happens all the time. I don't know if it happens to your reps, but it happened to me all the time. And I need to decide who to call. We've made dashboards to help you focus on the most important people. And that dashboard is called our Who's Hot dashboard. So this dashboard uses data from Salesforce and Eloqua to track the activity of our customers on our website. So you know that when you go to Tableau.com and you want to look at one of our white papers or download a trial, you're filling out a form, right? So this dashboard at the top shows the actual accounts. You can sort by rep if you'd like. And then you can click that account and drill down into who the contact is. Our actual dashboard shows what the activity was, whether they downloaded a trial, when it was, so on and so forth. Can also be filtered by date. So who has interacted on our website in the last day, right? I should get a hold of those guys pretty quick. So what happens here is that the idea here is to bring the most important people to the top of our attention. So it's a simple bar chart, but the people who've clicked and engaged in our website are at the top. And how much better is a conversation where I call and say, hi Sam, this is Stacy at Tableau. I'm your Tableau account manager. I work with this person and that person. I noticed that you downloaded a white paper on marketing, and I'd like to talk to you about some of the resources we have or understand what project you're working on, right? A much better conversation, much more comfortable situation for me than just a cold call about checking in and asking for time. And so at Tableau, we use as many resources as we have and as we can to create dashboards that help reps know who to target, like who's that low-hanging fruit, and then what they can talk about, what they've done, what their activity has been on our website, what they might be interested in learning about. So, actually, you know what? I'm going to jump back here. I didn't do the 10-second rule. In 10 seconds or less, can you tell me who I should be reaching out to? Can you tell me which accounts, right? Just like logistically, if I were to click on Lotzazdax, which is a fake name. Then all the contacts down here would be from that, and it would say, based on color, what they had done. And then if I were to click on this person, it would take me to their Salesforce page. So that continued interactivity, put them in the space where they're going to work, and they can act immediately. We're kind of impatient people.
Is there a reason you haven't embedded that in Salesforce?
Ooh, great question.
Good question.
I'll show you that in a little bit.
We will cover that, and we have. So just to wrap up these company-approved dashboards, we showed you the quota dashboard that uses space and color to help kind of harness the competitive nature of our salespeople. This helps reps know who they want to emulate and where they stand. There's something about peace of mind and having something really visual for me to know where I stand, even if it's at the bottom. The scorecard. Feed that hunger for numbers and information. We want information. We want to know what we need to do. So make it simple, but help us see where our gaps are. Use colors to say, you haven't made enough calls this week. Just get on the phones, or you haven't reached out to enough of your accounts. Whatever the gap might be, it helps us know the direction we could be heading. And finally, help the most important targets rise to the top using our Who's Hot dashboard. So allowing the most important people to come to our attention and helping us to have really educated conversations once we do that. So we're going to turn it over to Peter, who's going to talk about taking it from this, right? I have this dashboard, I have this information, but I have deeper questions. I want to understand more. We at Tableau, they made a decision to allow reps to use Tableau because we needed to understand the product in order to sell it. But what we found, and what our analytics team has told us, is that reps who use Tableau Desktop and actually are most active, because you can see on our server who's using the data sources the most, there was a direct correlation between their being the highest performers as well. So, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter. At the end, if you have questions, I can talk through some of the specifics on this. And also, I will have my email here where you could reach out if you have questions about the specific dashboards.
Perfect. Thanks, Stacy. I won't use the clicker.
That's going to work.
So again, as I talked about, my story's been a very interesting one. So I started up at headquarters, went all the way down to Austin, then up to DC, then to Chicago. Both pups rode in the U-Haul with me every single trip. So they're now worldly dogs. And through all this, like I mentioned, so I had to really rely on myself. So when I moved to Austin, we were about 45 minutes north, a place called The Domain, and there were about 10 people in the office. Now there's about 350. But same with DC. We were in a WeWork until we got our official office for the first 6 months. And so even there, we had about 10 people. And so through all of that, I had to get a little bit more self-reliant. And so what I'll do today is I'll kind of talk about the lessons that I've learned and where I've gone, and what you guys can do to take that into your own organizations and kind of not make as many mistakes that I did. So I'll kind of separate it out into Tableau Server and Tableau Desktop today, so you guys can kind of see the difference of what's possible in both products. So what we'll do is we'll first start with a story. We love stories here at Tableau. And so earlier this year, I was applying for the enterprise position. And so they asked me, you're going through this, and there's 2 territories that you might take over in Chicago. So we need to know a little bit more about, which one you're interested in. And so I thought, okay, great, opportunity to shine, right? Salespeople love to talk, love to pump ourselves up. And so what I did was I went through and I analyzed the different territories in our Salesforce, and I made this really quick Word document. And so I went through and I kind of listed things out and kind of where I was looking. And then the day of the interview, I was looking through this, and they were giving me different numbers on some stuff. And so I was like, why are they having different numbers than me? So when I looked into it, I had actually connected to a data set that only contained customers. And I, as an enterprise rep on our team on MMK, I have actually customers and prospects, or people that haven't bought Tableau before. And so in this, I thought I had a total of 108 customers when really I had 138. And I ran a report thinking that prospects were anyone that just didn't own licenses, right? That's a pretty easy guess. So I ran that report of, license equals 0, prospect. License above 0, customer. But in this case, those prospects were actually customers who had lapsed in maintenance, and they were just ones that had a license at some point. They knew about Tableau, but they just didn't pay that maintenance and renew the version upgrades and the support. And so in here, I almost went into a meeting with bad data. And so I went through in the morning and corrected that and thankfully got it before the interview where I might have messed up. But this is an example of probably what you guys are kind of scared about, right? Sales reps going in, asking these questions, having bad data, and then coming out the other side with all these, being very excited to share with customers, and all of a sudden they're like, no, we haven't bought that before, or no, we don't have 10 of that. And so through here, what I want to kind of talk about first is what you can do to help kind of prevent this situation from happening. So another thing that I went through and did is I had to build this Excel file manually. Probably also something you don't want us doing as sales reps, right? And what I did in here was I realized that some of these customers were showing up in some of our data as having 0 employees, which I don't think that's really a company, right? And so what I had to do was I had to go to our Bradstreet data, our data.com data, and then I blended that with our backend Salesforce data. And so what I did was then I took a max calculation across these different employees and revenue in order to see a min and a max range of what all these different organizations were reporting, right? Because that went into how I prioritized some of my accounts. So this is actually real data. And so when I also went through here, I realized that in our backend Salesforce, some data sets added 3 characters at the end and some didn't. So I also had to go through and manually create this in order to create that blend when I'm looking at those different data sources. So this is the stuff that you guys are scared about, right? Like, this is a lot of power for me. I might have made a lot of mistakes in that. And so this is, first we're going to talk about just how you guys can prevent that from happening. So if we jump back over to our PowerPoint, where is the mouse? There you go. So, the ultimate goal with Tableau, and I'm sure you guys have heard this from your account managers before, is one source of truth. One place where as a sales rep or as anyone, operations, IT, anything, can go in and ask a question, get an answer, and I'm confident that that answer is right. And so through that one source of truth, there's a lot of different things that you guys can do to enable that. So one thing is field comments. So if in my data set, I had originally, or my backend team had gone through and added a comment to that account name field, I might have known these are customers only. Prospects are in another data source, right? That could have prevented that. And to do that is really easy. You can start creating your metadata model in Tableau Desktop just by right-clicking on it, going down to our default properties, and adding those comments. So it's really easy, and it gives us an idea of what we're looking at and what we're trying to use. And you can do this to all fields. And in a moment, we'll show how you can publish a data source, so then that foundation is available for everyone to leverage and use in their reports. Another thing that you can do is data source naming an organization. So right here is an actual view of our Tableau server, and it has different data source names, how many times people have viewed it, how many workbooks are attached. But in here, it's a little bit confusing, to be honest. Case master. What cases? Is that support cases, IT cases? Is that ops cases? Assets. Again, what assets, right? Is that customer assets, prospect assets? And so coming through here and keeping that in mind as you guys start to look at self-service is going to be very important. Also with data source descriptions. So if you didn't know, this page is available on any data source, and you can add these details to it. So the sales opportunity data source is the one-stop shop for sales pipeline analysis, including opportunity splits. I can see who the owner is in case I need to ask, hey, are there customers and prospects in this, or just customers? I can get an idea of when it's refreshed. So if I'm trying to prepare for a call, I can see, was this refreshed a week ago or a minute ago? And you can come through and even add tags. So I can look, I have a question about contacts. I have a question about leads. So I can just search contacts, and this data source should come up if that tag is there. And so finally, with kind of that goal of one source of truth, is that those uniform IDs, like I showed earlier. As you guys start to look at exposing some of this to different teams internally, really keep in mind when I have a question, what data sources are going to provide the answer, and how are those going to connect. So in the instance of Salesforce, maybe you add a sales ID long and sales ID short, so we know how to connect it through all those data sources. And so what I've been working on with a lot of my customers is this thing that I like to call create a Truman Show experience for your end users. Whether that is your external customers or your internal customers as sales reps, you guys are going to be able to, in a moment, I'll show you how to kind of keep everyone in that bubble, right? You decide what streets are there, what houses, where they work, but you're on the outside pulling all those levers, keeping them from ever reaching the edge of that bubble and directing them back to the center. And so as you create that Truman Show experience, what I want to start with today is showing you guys how to enable self-service. And so what we'll do, sorry, give me 1 second here, is we'll take a look at how to do that in Tableau Desktop. Okay, so first and foremost, if anyone didn't know, you can actually publish data sources not connected to a workbook as just a place to create reports from and a place where other people can connect their workbooks to. So when you do this and publish a data source up to Tableau Server and online, then your end users have the option when you connect to a data source. There's a data source called Tableau Server. And that means connect to something that my sales ops and IT has already published to create content off of that, which has a lot of benefits for you guys, right? It's not 40 workbooks attached with 40 live connections to SQL. Everyone's hitting that one thing, so that way it pipes all the data into there and it's not putting a strain on the back end. So how to do that is we just come up to our data source. We're going to right-click on it and we're going to publish it to server. So in this case, I'm going to do it to Tableau Online. And we will connect. Oh, because of our internet. Okay. Oh, that's right, sorry. It would help if I typed in the right one, right? Okay, perfect. So in a moment, it'll ask me to sign in. So I'll type in my credentials. We'll sign in and publish it up. And so this is a view of multi-tenancy, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's asking me now, what site do I want to publish to? So again, if you have an internal versus external, if you have an HR site versus a sales site, this is where it prompts you when you're publishing that data source of where to go to. So we'll publish it to the main one. It'll ask, oh, yeah, I think I published it before. So now that data source is gathering all of it on the back end as an extract, because it's Tableau Online. And it's going to publish it up there, and it's going to ask, all right, well, what project do you want to add that to? What tags do you want to have? What is the description of that data source, right? That screen we saw before. So in this case, we'll just publish it up. It'll send that data, and then we'll go over to our Tableau Online, and we'll sign in. So again, as admins, if you guys are doing this with Tableau Online or Tableau Server, this is multi-tenancy. So this allows you to create different sites to really silo people out, again, whether they're internal or external customers. So we'll jump into there. Publishing complete, perfect. I can schedule the updates using the sync client, but I'm actually going to jump back over to this one, and we'll log in. So now that we are logged in, as you can see here, I'm an admin. So I can see my different projects, default, HR, sales test area. And so I can go through and edit those, publish content to them. And as you can see, we have one data source in the sales test area. So that's where I publish that MMK append file to. So we can go over and we can interact with it. And we can click on it. It's not going to have any workbooks, but it has a data source here. And I can click on that and say, all right, well, I want to create a new workbook. So this is the web edit functionality in Tableau Server and Online, and it looks familiar, right? This is almost what desktop looks like on your laptop. And so we'll get in a minute of what the limitations of that web edit is. But first, let's take a look at when I publish this data source up, what kind of options do I have in order to, again, segregate and silo that data a bit further? So what we'll look at here is row level security. So let's say this is my map of my sales territories. And as a sales ops person, I only want Peter to see Illinois. I want Jeff to see Indiana, and Susie to see Ohio. Those are my sales territories. Well, what you'll notice is once I published that data source and logged into Tableau Online, it actually says my name down here now. And so what I can do is I can leverage that view to see what my sales reps or my end customers are going to see before I even publish it. So let's kind of look at what that looks like. So I can come down here and it'll have a list of all of my users. And so I can emulate groups, individuals of what they see. And so what I'll do is I created this state use filter. And so in that, how I did that is I just came up to my server. I said create a user filter. And I want to create that on my states field. Perfect. So I'll say, well, for me, I want to see everything because I'm the admin. But for Peter Schmitz, right, he only is going to see Illinois. And I can name this user filter, so I'll just call this my, sales reps individual views. Click OK. Here, let's drag this off because that was one I did before. So now I can come over here and say sales reps individual views. I can add it in. We can come through here and apply to multiple, say all using this data source. That way anything they create is being applied to there. And so now when I come down and I emulate what my end users are going to see in this report, this is all Peter Schmitz is ever going to see. And that's all the data he is ever going to have access to if you allow him to build content off of that data source. And so when I publish this as a data source only, it's going to go up there with it. But you guys also have another checks and balances that you can use. You have project permissions. So if we look in here, and we come through, and I'll come back to this in a second. So again, as you guys saw before, as an admin, I have access to all of these folders. Well, if I log out over here, and then I log in as my Peter Schmitz, oh, if I remember the password. So in here, if I go to my home screen, I don't see that HR project because I'm not given permissions to see it. So that's another checks and balances that you guys can use. So as Stacy mentioned earlier, right, we have sales reps publishing things all the time. So in our organization, we only have access to publish to sales test area. And then you as admins are the only ones that have the ability to move something from sales test area to production or to default or to HR. And so in here, this is another way that you guys can keep people separated, keep data separated, and have that Truman Show experience. So your end users think, oh, great, this is my data, I have access to it, and they don't even know that it's just a slice of the main pie. And so as we looked at earlier, we have that web edit function as well. So this is kind of the first step to enabling self-service that you guys can do in your organization. It's really easy. And it gives people a lot of access. You heard at the keynote that desktop is slowly going to be moving to the cloud, that this web edit function is only going to get more powerful. And so in here, I have the ability to create reports. So I can come out just like I did before, and I can put my account ID out there. I can put those employee numbers out there. The only things that I can't do currently in Tableau Server is I can't really edit the metadata. So I can't come through here like I did before and right-click on that account name. And again, there's the comment. I can't come through and I can't add my own comments. I can't do certain things in there. I also can't create hierarchies. So if I thought account ID short should go below sales account ID, I can't do that right now. But a lot of other functionality is there. And as you saw in the keynote as well, we're coming up with things like verified data sources, or allowing you guys to see what fields people create to add that to the foundation. So if I'm off on my own island like I was, and I'm creating all these fields and people start using my workbooks instead of yours, I'm doing your job for you. So move those fields over, take advantage of my work, and then republish that so that way the foundation of that report has all that extra info in there for your reps. So in this enabling of self-service, we looked at publishing data sources, how we can leverage row-level security, that kind of multi-tenancy versus project permissions, some limitations. And so all of this, I like to describe it as a Panama Canal system for Tableau and for your data. You guys decide which locks raise and lower, which ships come through, and where they have access to. So at your own organization, it's very easy to start to implement that. And again, you can do it at a very small scale. Try it with your top sales rep. If you're scared of situations happening before, like I showed with bad data and everything else, have a POC internally and start to show them what's possible. And so that's kind of how to get started with web edit. But once we get through and people have that access, now we can start to drive more effective calls through self-service. So let's start looking at how we can do that. So in here, I built this view on my own that then got used in the Bless dashboards, right? Again, you as admins can see what content people are doing and move it into that production. So I went through and I thought to myself, all right, well, if I'm on a call with a healthcare customer and they say, well, who else is using Tableau in my area? I now know out of my P1s who is, and now I know if this person asks from a 9,000 person company, I shouldn't probably refer this 15-person company, right? It might not be a very valuable conversation. You can also split it out by cities, by sub-industry. So that way I know I'm not referring a healthcare system to a dental office when I'm trying to set up that call. And so allowing people to come through and create their own priorities based on my criteria, because I might think something's more valuable with a certain employee revenue license scenario than Stacy does. And so in desktop, this allows me to create that and then start to use it on those calls. So I have very quick things, right? I mean, the point of this is I try to minimize any follow-ups, right? You always get those meeting follow-up, checking in, all that. This allows me to have all of that on one call, so the next one is moving something along rather than just giving extra info that I didn't know at that time. And so another view that we can look at is some more Bless dashboards that have kind of been built over the years in our system. So this is pipeline opportunities, so I can start my day looking at how many I have, my total pipeline versus my expected. So in Tableau, our expected pipeline is a percentage. So each deal stage has a percent. So if I have a $100,000 deal, it's in Discover. Discover is a 20% category. So that deal and expected value is going to be 20,000. So I can come in here and see, all right, well, what have I been closing? For these big deals, who are my pre-sales people attached? And have they done anything, completed part of their work or all of their work? So I can call them and drive them to that. Like Stacy showed earlier, we can jump right into the account history. We can look at the op in Salesforce. And I can have a better meeting with my manager when he asks what's going on this week. We can also look at account analysis. So what are my accounts doing? This is kind of like a who's hot, but just at an account level that we've built internally. So what are people buying? Is a certain industry buying more? I can see those trends over time. In classroom training, so when people, and I don't know if anyone's been here to a local classroom training, but when you sign up on the website, it registers here internally. So I can go down and I can look at location Chicago. Internally at Tableau, if you're sending typically 6 to 7 people to a training, it makes more sense fiscally and just organization-wise to have it on site. So now instead of calling someone saying, hey, saw you register for the training, that's great, what are you trying to learn? I'm calling and adding value saying, hey, I noticed that you guys registered 10 people. Let's save some money and do this on site. That way you guys aren't having to reimburse for gas or time. And let's switch this over and get some of that money back for you. And so I've done that multiple times with customers, and that builds that trust, right? I'm not just trying to jam more licenses down their throat constantly on the phone. I'm actually calling in and helping them. And I think, all these dashboards throughout this, what I'll show is, you want us to be effective too. So if you guys are working with your Salesforce vendor, you want them to have these conversations, right? Not those, can I get 15 minutes of your time? How's Salesforce rollout going? What else can I sell you? So these are the ways that we can add that into here. And then finally, with a quick story, so if anyone doesn't know, we have a product called Tableau Reader. And what it does is we originally created it to help organizations evaluate whether new teams should be added to Tableau Server. So you can think of it as kind of like an Adobe Acrobat. It can open Tableau files, but it gets access to all the backend data. So if that file gets out, anyone can open it. If you make a mistake, you got to resend the file. So again, it's meant to be used in very short time periods to add more people to that environment. So actually in August, as a real example, that I logged in when I got the new territory and I was going through it, and I found that customer at the top. The next person down is 80 installs over the last year, and this person has 600. And so I called into there, and what I realized was they had 100 people that were using Tableau Reader, and they had to install it every 2 months in order to update the version because their desktop users were updating. So now we have a POC running over there to get them onto Tableau Server, so this guy isn't just trying to find open windows to jump out of, right, as that IT person installing it. And so these are ways that you can see, when people are installing it. What are their names we can call down, just like Stacy showed. And so these are ways to drive those effective calls. And if you enable that self-service, this is what your reps can do. So again, through these effective calls, make sure your reps have access to the data they need easily and quickly, kind of Stacy's 10-second rule. Am I able to quickly get an answer from this dashboard when I open it? Schedule reoccurring one-on-ones with your reps if you're not already, and do call shadows to find out, what questions are stumping them, what questions are having them to send an email a week later, and start to look to see how data can help that. Your server admin views are your best friend. So this is another example of some of our data sources of what we're using, what project they're in. Use those to see if sales asks you for 10 workbooks and you publish them all and you see they're only using 2, you can have better conversations going back of, hey, so you asked for these 10, but you guys are only using these 2. Why is that? Were the other 8 not great? Can we fix that? And then it can also start a conversation so you guys do less work. All right, well, in the future, if you don't need all 10, let's do this one at a time, right? And then finally, think about how you guys can develop customer-facing views for your reps or for internal people. So on the call, when I'm selling Tableau, it's very easy for me to show the product and show how we're using internally. So think about that for your guys' selves. Like, do you want to have an inventory dashboard that's maybe a little bit scrubbed, but that a salesperson can put in front of someone and say, hey, you guys usually order 30 a month, and you've gone through that already in 10 days. Let's see if we can get some more inventory in there. And again, you have those value-adding calls. So just something to keep in mind if you have sensitive data, think about how that can be used customer-facing wise, kind of like the dashboard Stacy showed you earlier with that fake data. So people can kind of see what's going on in their industry or in their city around them. So once you start to drive those more effective calls, now you're going to need to identify some revenue-driving KPIs or key performance indicators. So here at Tableau, we are metriced on having 2x of our total quota by the end of month 1. And how we got there was we analyzed past sales of where we started on day 1 of a quarter, where we ended, what reps had in their pipeline at that time, what they ended with, and we found on average, if by the end of month 1 you had 2x of your pipeline, you would have I think it was an 82% chance of making your number. So we drive towards that, and we put that on that commercial scorecard that you saw with those red dots at the top. Stacy's, I think, said 1.68, and that's why it was red. So these are ways that you can, in a moment, I'll show you ways that you can start to identify these KPIs and then drive them through. So as we look here, one thing that I built as I came into this, after I realized that error with that file, is I built, I built this out-of-maintenance customer analysis. So again, I didn't realize that those 17 prospects that I thought were out of maintenance. So what I did was, I went through and I created some calcs. So I said, all right, well, can they still pay? Which here at Tableau, if you lapse on maintenance, you have a 6-month window with an added fee to get back on the bandwagon. And after that, you have to buy a new license. So I first separated out by who can still pay and who's too late to pay. Then I went through and I color-coded anyone under 30 days is red, anyone over is yellow. So when I'm calling through, right, it's not that I'm calling the person with 6 months left, I'm calling the person with 2 days left. And I have that more effective conversation and try to recover it. And so I did this with one of our clients, and it just turned out that the IT guy quit, a new one came on, they didn't really know about Tableau, but their people were using it. So I was able to catch that account before they had to buy new licenses by using this view. And then finally, I can sort this max maintenance end date to then see, all right, well, next, I want to call someone whose maintenance lapsed 2 days ago, not whose maintenance lapsed in 2009. So again, it allows me to prioritize my 8 to 5 call time to really have the best situation going in and be armed with the most. I also went through and prioritized my prospects. So I looked at, what industry they're in, what their annual revenue is. Again, this is that max calculation I talked about. So this is taking the max across 3 different revenue numbers and employee numbers. And so now I can, if I'm going to focus on healthcare for the day, I'm kind of rinsing, repeating my conversation, so I'm very effective, and I've researched the industry in the morning. And now I can prioritize who I'm going to call first, the 28,000 person company or the 2.6 billion. And again, I'm driving that conversation. I'm having more effective calls by using something like this. To your question earlier about, well, why don't we put this in Salesforce? We have, and it's awesome. If you don't know, Tableau can be embedded in most browser applications through an iframe. And we also have APIs so that different systems can talk to one another. So in here, when I call an account, I have all their information, phone, website, and then I can see, all right, well, they bought 38 desktop and 205 interactors. Have they steadily grown, or was there little jumps in here where they bought a lot more? And beyond that, if I go to actual contact pages internally, I can then see in here, what's kind of going on with the contact level. What have they been doing? Everything else. And so I can see those views. Let me come down here real quick. And so as we look to kind of what's next, these are ways that you guys can identify those revenue-driven KPIs. And again, put yourself in your rep's shoes, understand what they're working on, discovering and creating KPIs that drive revenue. Also think about historical versus snapshots of your data. So think about how it's structured. Originally at Tableau, when we updated an opportunity, it overwrote that row in the system. So it was really hard for us to roll back and say, where were we on May 5th and what did that look like? And so what we did is then we started doing this account history table. So that way, every time I changed something, it created a new row. And I could roll back to a point in time. And then again, you can embed it in most applications. So with customer on-site planning, I used to own New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. And so it's really hard for me as a rep to have a lot of customer on-sites. And I usually only got to go on site twice a quarter. So I had to really effectively plan out my day. And so what I did was I went through, and if I was seeing this customer at 3 p.m., and I knew from Chicago it took 7 hours, I would go along that route and say, all right, well, if it takes 7 hours and it's at 3 p.m., I need to leave at 8. But if I know this is the highway, I can take a radial selection, see who's within 20 miles of that highway, and call them and add them to the route. So now I'm at them at 8 a.m., and I'm adding more calls. And so what this did was some people that only owned Boston or New York would schedule 2 meetings a day, and I had 3 states that took about 9 hours to drive across, and I usually had 6 meetings a day. And so in this, if you allow reps to have a little bit more flexibility, that's something that they can achieve too. So again, geofield best practices are Latin long lines, so if you can add that to your data, great. Be aware of what their territory layouts are. Do they have different time zones? I used to cover all of Western Canada, and so at the end of the day at 4 o'clock, I had to take time creating reports to see who was still in the office. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about your sales reps of what they go through every day. And then finally, Tableau Online is a great way to very quickly roll out Tableau externally if you have external sales reps without having too much IT set up, and then also allowing them to not have to VPN in or something like that. So finally, we want to end today with kind of thinking outside of the box of Tableau. So the first example is at Walmart, when they were evaluating Tableau, one of their analysts had access to desktop during that POC, and he had an idea. Well, what if I looked at our ordering data blended with weather.com data? So he kind of explored it, downloaded the data set from weather.com, and what he found out was for every degrees above, I think it was 87 in the Midwest, that equated to $1 million of ice cream sales in that week. If he didn't have access to desktop, he wouldn't have been able to see and ask that question. And so they went huge with Tableau and kept a lot of hardware behind it so they can stay ahead of the targets of the world by looking at that and ordering ahead of time so they have stock while everyone else is out of push pops, right? Another example is every time I changed a territory, I felt like it took forever to connect with people on LinkedIn. And it just, I was always it was hard to saturate a territory so people knew who I was. So I started thinking, okay, well, there's got to be a smarter way to do this. And so I went into LinkedIn and I found an other section of how to add contacts, and I saw one of the options was Outlook. Well, my contacts aren't in Outlook, they're in Salesforce. So I thought to myself, okay, well, do a test file. So what I did is I went into Outlook and I exported, and I found out that Outlook's format is first name, last name, email, and a bunch of other details. But LinkedIn only takes first name, last name, email to do a search as you upload a file. So what I did was I went into Tableau and I built that view so that I could go in and extract 500 at a time, because that's the limit for the file. And so now, instead of at the end of my territory, everyone knowing who I am, every time I get a new territory, I add 6,000 people in 20 minutes. And so having that ability to be able to reverse your way back and see that in the data and then use Tableau as that, conversation starter and transition is really powerful. And then finally, another really great thing you can do internally, and we do it here, and it's free, and it just gets people excited, is have an internal competition. So we have ours, it's called VizWiz. And 2 years ago, we got to the semifinals, I think, maybe finals, I'm not sure. But what we did was we got given a data set, and how it works is you give the sales reps a data set or whoever you're doing it with, and you say, all right, you have 1 week to create a dashboard and tell a story. And so what we got was accident data throughout the US from the National Traffic Advisory. And it was October, and I was like, all right, how can I be clever? How can we get to the next round? And so I started thinking, all right, how can I tell a story around Halloween? And so what I did was I built this dashboard, and I'll show you real quick, because I know we're out of time. And in here, it's this one. So what I did was I built this dashboard to tell a story about what Halloween costumes not to wear, because trees get hit a lot, so don't dress as a tree, and what costumes to wear. It's really safe to dress as a fire hydrant. And then I kind of added some fun into this. So if I click around, I can see, all right, well, what's an idea if I want to dress as shrubbery? I can start to see in there some other really interesting observations. It's actually more dangerous for me to go out on Halloween when it's clear versus when it's snowing. And it's not great to trick or treat from midnight to 2 a.m. or even 7 to 10 p.m. And so these are ways that you can drive that hunger internally, get people asking questions, and start to get them excited about data. And this is just a fun project, or even if you don't enable self-service, it's something that you guys can do. So we've talked a lot today, from blessed dashboards to getting creative with Tableau, how you can drive reps to be better, how they can be better with access to data. So we just want to thank you guys so much for attending our session. If you get a chance, we'd really appreciate any feedback you could have. It really helps us develop these sessions for the next year, and as we get selected again to kind of look at that content and present even better stuff to you guys. And if you have any questions at all, our contact info is on the screen. We love to help. Even if we're not your account managers, we can pitch in, find something, we can talk to you guys about these templates you saw today, and help in your own organizations.
So we don't have time really to do question and answer unless you want to come up and chat with us or yell out a question. But you do have our email. Thank you so much for coming, and good luck
Thank you guys so much.
with your sales. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the conference.